Comrades, greetings from Germany, the cradle of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, to comrades watching this magnificent session all over the world. This is an inspiring moment, and Alan Woods has already outlined how the crisis has an unprecedented and global dimension. The crisis is also hitting Germany very hard, and this is only the beginning of a turning point with long-lasting consequences. This underlines that the ideas of scientific socialism are very modern in the 21st century. Now there is one myth in many brains which says that the Germans are happy with Mama Merkel and will never fight. I would like to expose this myth. Present pandemic is just a trigger, not the deep root of the present capitalist crisis of overproduction. This pandemic reveals all the deep problems, scandals, inequality, imbalances, privatization, contradictions, injustice, and grievances that have existed and piled up for a very long time. This crisis is now being used to redistribute wealth in favor of the ruling class, the rich and speculators that always try to make a fortune out of any crisis. But already towards the end of 2019, symptoms of the deep economic crisis have accumulated in Germany. Gross domestic product in Germany last year in 2019 only grew by 0.6%, which is nearly zero. And in the motor car sector, which is a key industry for Germany, already in autumn, last September, October, there were clear symptoms of a crisis of overproduction. Long ago, a boss of BMW car company said, "I know there are too many cars globally, but there are too few BMW cars." Now in summer 2020, which is a hot summer, we get daily messages about threatening workplace closures and massive sackings, destruction of jobs in the motor car sector, in airlines, shipyards, department stores, small shops, in most sectors of the economy. There are local protest demos up and down the country from day to day, but there's no alternative and no joint struggle nationally and internationally offered by the trade union and workers' leaders.
5 minutes gone.
Part of the German miracle in the past few years was the enormous casualization and cheap labor. And those workers on casual and temporary jobs, contracts, are the first to lose their jobs now and to be sacked. The official unemployment figures admit a growth of unemployment from 2.2 to nearly 3 million now, but this does not express the real dimension of the crisis. Unemployment statistics do not include self-employed people. Many of them are faced with ruin as a consequence of the lockdown. Nor does it include students without rich parents and grants who have serious problems as they've lost their casual jobs due to the lockdown to finance their courses and their existence. Now, whereas in the United States, you hear about 40 million being made unemployed in the question of days and weeks, in Germany, they have an instrument still to buffer this development a bit. In Germany, in April, there were 10 million workers out of work, but not lost their jobs, but on short-time compensation, which is a sort of subsidy out of the workers' funds and the National Labor Exchange. And now there are still 6.8 million workers on short-time compensation money, hoping for better times and fearing unemployment at the same time. And take these 6.8 million and compare this to the peak of the 2009 crisis, you see the difference, because then in May 2009, the peak figure was 1.44 million workers on short-time compensation only. One of the advantages of German capitalism has been in the last few decades, modern industry, highly dependent on exports. Exporting not only industrial goods, vehicles, machine tools, and chemicals, but also millions of tons of pork. But this advantage of German capitalism, dependent on exports, is now turning into an enormous disadvantage as, faced with the crisis. And this explains why the ruling class in Germany and Merkel present themselves as pro-European and desperately try to keep the European together somehow. Because most exports go to European countries. And Comrade George from London has spoken on the European Union already.
10 minutes gone.
The present crisis is increasingly affecting the south of Germany. Historically prosperous areas with traditionally high living standards and low unemployment, with big employers such as Daimler, BMW, Audi, Siemens, Bosch, and others. But those areas will be hit hard now, as in the first 6 months of 2020, sales of the car industry have slumped by 35%. And in the second quarter of 2020, the slump was even 47%. So I could give you lots of figures about the pessimism of the industrialists in the car industry and the supplier industry down in the south. Hello?
Rob, we need a Spanish translation.
Many figures indicate that the question of the crisis of the industry, especially in the south, is very serious. Some 15,000 jobs are at stake at Daimler alone. And 2/3 of the industrialists, of industries in the southwest, in the state of Baden-Württemberg, are pessimistic about the future, the coming months. And of course, this is being used to blackmail the workers to accept any sort of sacrifices and give up many of the gains that they fought for in the last decades. At the same time, retired Daimler boss Dieter Zetsche receives a pension of 4,250 euro a day. Now, while the big car manufacturers have accumulated reserves of some 100 billion euro altogether, many of the smaller industrial enterprises and suppliers around the motor car producers could go bankrupt this coming autumn. And there are fears that this might trigger off a new banking crisis. So anyway, we're faced with a completely new situation when the employers are really on the offensive and try to destroy everything that the workers have achieved in living standards and living and quality of life. For instance, recently the government bailed out Lufthansa from bankruptcy. With the 9 billion they spent for this, they pledged for this, they could have taken over completely nationalized Lufthansa, but of course they didn't want to. Anyway, comrade, time is up, but I try to underline there is readiness of the working class in Germany to fight, as we've seen with some cases. For instance, one factory, the southernmost German town of Sonthofen, there was a 5-week-long struggle against the closure of a factory. And there could be a hot autumn big strike movement in the public transport sector, where after years of privatization, worsening of conditions, there's rage and militancy of the workers. And this has grown enormously. There's also a movement of youth, as we see with the solidarity with the Black Lives Matter, which attracted tens of thousands in June. So to sum up, there will be enormous bitterness and struggles in Germany. And I would like to quote not Engels, but a liberal, a member of parliament to finish my statement. Liberal parliamentarian Marco Buschmann said, quite soon revolution could be in the air if things continue like this. As soon as the German middle class will find out that their job is finished and their private savings through shares are bust, they will radicalize. Comrades, I could give you many more examples, but the main thing is we must be prepared for this future. We need a socialist program to use the potential of industry and science, not for private profit, but for the benefit of mankind and environment. The slogan of the Socialist United States of Europe is more urgent than ever, and we need a Marxist leadership, and therefore let's go forward to building the IMT. Thank you.